Okay, so first of all, I guess please bear with us. It's kind of difficult to follow a happiness panel. This is maybe not nearly as universal as happiness, but I do believe blockchain is something that is eventually going to be universal, and I think it's good that we all start understanding it a little bit better. So just before I address my panelists, just let me quickly say a couple of things about myself. I'm the director of our innovation hub within DMCC. My work is mostly around developing technologies and platforms for facilitating and growing trade of commodities through Dubai. So I'm actually, I was very intrigued when I was invited to talk about blockchain and smart cities. I know quite a bit about blockchain. I know very little about smart cities, and hence I'm very honored to be here with my panelists today to maybe learn more a bit about that and hopefully have an interesting conversation. You know, before we start, I just want to say, you know, blockchain is a technology that is expected to be valued at over $5 billion as an industry in the next 5 years. It's about 60% annual growth expected over this period of time. So it's something that perhaps not all of you are familiarized with today, but it's certainly something that I think you're going to learn more about and hear more about as we go forward. And so, Ghazi, perhaps if I can start with you and just ask you the basic question. Can you tell us what is blockchain and how does it work within the framework of smart city development?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. My name is Ghazi Atallah. I'm the CEO of NXN. We're essentially a smart city and a digital service provider. We work with the government of Dubai and the government of federal government in the UAE and the government of Saudi Arabia on digital transformation, smart city transformation. A lot of it is around blockchain. Probably the easiest way to explain blockchain is to put it into a context and say that if, for example, the four of us were in some kind of a chain and we were, as it were before, a long time ago, ledgers were written manually. So if I was to do a transaction, I would go to you and I would say, here's a transaction, and you would do the calculations and you would write it down. And today's world, that exercise of writing it down is if you want, technologically driven. It's computerized, it's digitized, but the most important part of it is immediately shared with the rest of us as also ledger owners or ledger, if you want, transaction providers. So what happens is, as soon as this transaction is executed, it is shared across all the chain. And therefore, it is what we call secure and impermeable. It can never be changed, because even if something happens to his ledger, the same transaction's in my ledger, and it's his ledgers and his ledgers, and there's some cryptographic things that make sure that it is what it is, essentially, as a transaction. So maybe that's probably the easiest way to explain what blockchain is. It allows people to have secure transaction. They are safe. They can never be erased. It will always be there in history, so it makes for a very good database, essentially. But it is a shared database and a shared responsibility for people to transact. So I hope this is a fairly simple transaction. Now, fairly simple explanation of blockchain. And I think how does that apply into smart city, we will discuss later on, right?
Excellent, excellent, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, I think we've all maybe read about what's happened in the U.S. recently. Equifax, one of the credit rating agencies, had this huge hack. So, you know, I assume something like blockchain technology would essentially eliminate those opportunities for hacking and having data essentially disappearing or being shared inappropriately like that. But let's see what Dubai is doing. And Alexander, if I can ask you, I know Dubai has a number of initiatives in place to make its smart city dream come true. How do you think blockchain technology can help Dubai achieve these smart city objectives and delivering seamless, safe, impactful city experiences?
Okay.
Yeah.
As you know, in all technologies, blockchain is an enabler. It enables a process. So at the Dubai economy, what we are concerned more is the business registration system for businesses. So we advise the Dubai Smart City officials about the fact that before you even do a blockchain of the processes, you need to do a BPR, what we call the business process re-engineering. Because there's no point having a blockchain if the entrepreneur, the investor has to go through 10, 15 touch points as currently for some services. So my job here is I'm obsessed with looking at all the regulations of Dubai economy to make sure that the pain points of the entrepreneur, the investor, the businessman is reduced and see whether it can be collapsed. The keyword is integrated before it can be put on the blockchain. So my belief is that once this is done and blockchain is implemented, you can expect faster services, efficient services, because to the businessman anywhere in the world, and especially here, time is money. So if you take a longer time to approve your, for example, if you're setting up a restaurant and you take 6 months to set up a restaurant, you're paying rent and you cannot start your business, and that is really the pain points. The second issue about the smart city is that we are concerned with the real economy. The real economy is where the SMEs are in the trading sectors. Many of them in Dubai, for example, I know for a fact that they're still using weights of cash. It's still very traditional. So my department is trying to have a digital strategy for the SMEs and the startups. What we're doing is we're trying to help them improve their digital strategy so that they can be plugged into the smart city grid. So it's work in progress, it's challenging, it changes mindset, and we know for a fact that if 3 conditions are satisfied by the government, security, revenue, as well as authority, because we don't want a blockchain which undercuts the authority of an agency. So again, we are convincing the key stakeholders that think of the KYCs or of the customer, of the entrepreneur as part of the blockchain strategy. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'll just follow up later. I'll ask you a little bit about some of those initiatives, if you can share with us what you're working on. Mike, thank you very much for joining us. So as we just heard in our last panel, one of Dubai's strategies to become the happiest city on earth. How do you think that the blockchain technology can basically increase efficiency and improve quality of life in this respect, I guess, as far as building a smart city?
Well, first of all, let me just say that I'm glad you didn't ask me to describe blockchain and that Ghazi got that question. To me, it's like trying to explain what is the internet. But truth is, I think that blockchain will be a disruptive technology for cities, for many industries, but cities included. Dubai has set a very aggressive goal, which I love. And one of the ways that you'll see that come to life is the reduction in paper transactions that cities use. It will come to no surprise to anybody that cities are fairly bureaucratic. Blockchain helps reduce that bureaucracy, helps increase efficiencies. Specifically, it allows for integration of systems horizontally so that different departments can share the same information. And you don't have situations where, I'll use an example back home. We did a study with the city of Cambridge, just outside of Boston, and the question was asked, how long does it take to get a permit? The city said, well, it takes 3 days. Everybody else in the room laughed. And he said, no, it's true, because it goes to this department on day 1, this department on day 2, this department on day 3, and failed to recognize the fact that it spent at least 30 days in about each of those departments. So the real answer was about 120 days. Blockchain allows that barrier of information from being shared. So it's more instantaneous, it can be more easily accessible. And I think one of the ways to capture what is blockchain and what it means for a city, or any industry for that matter, is the fact that if the internet is a network of information that's being shared, I've heard blockchain described as a network of trust. It builds that trust, so there's less verification that is required. More time is spent on completing a task rather than the bureaucracy leading to that task. So I think there's many ways. There are use cases that we can talk about. Brooklyn, New York, for instance, is experimenting with the use of blockchain and microgrids, allowing neighbors to generate their own electricity with solar panels and sell it to members of the community. Blockchain is the mechanism that makes that possible.
Excellent, excellent. You know, I mean, we see this on a day in, day out basis in trade, essentially, where still a lot of transactions are essentially paper driven, letters of credit, bills of ladings. A lot of the documents that are needed for trading goods and moving goods around the world are still rooted on official documents, sometimes multiple copies of documents. So we're very excited to hear about this. And maybe, Gaso, if you can tell us a little bit more about the new opportunities and new innovations that are happening in either public or private sector that you might have seen. Have you been able to work, or can you share any experience on pilot projects or initiatives that you worked on in the region in terms of implementing blockchain?
Yes, certainly. As far as the UAE is concerned, and particularly Dubai, if you want very aggressive in terms of launching new blockchain initiatives, we have quite a few examples here, like the land department that essentially is using smart contracts to renew your lease and smart checks to pay for those leases using blockchain infrastructure. So it makes the entire process a lot more seamless and easy. So instead of you having to go to your landlord and exchange papers and sign and exchange checks and so on, the entire thing is done using smart contracts and smart checks, and it is automated to a lot of extent. That is a pilot project that is starting here in Dubai. In Abu Dhabi, we are working also with the healthcare authority to launch birth certificates, death certificates using blockchain. Again, it's I don't want to, this is not a blockchain discussion, but the underlying technology is blockchain, but the underlying technology can be, a lot of things that make up a smart city. One of the functions of blockchain is to make this integration a lot easier and smoother. And this is a big problem in cities today. It's usually departments act in silos. So the integration between departments is very difficult. And to make this a smooth and as seamless as possible of a transaction for the individual, the departments have to work together. So in essence, when you do a transaction like renewing your lease agreement and paying for it using smart contracts, smart checks, in the background, many different departments are interacting, and there are lots of data that is being shared, and that's enabled through blockchain, but that's just making my life a lot easier and a lot more seamless, effectively.
And so this land department and the birth and death certificates are pilot projects, as you said, at this stage, so that's not something that we would be having access to yet.
The land department is going to be fully in production soon. I'm not sure if it's actually launched in GITEX in production or launched as a proof of concept, but I'm pretty sure that's going to happen within the next couple of months.
Okay, that's very exciting actually to learn about. And if we go back a little bit and then think about what you were just saying in terms of government collaboration, Smart Dubai in their blockchain position paper, I guess they talk about the first pillar of the strategy is government efficiency and enabling a paperless digital city for all transactions. And so, Alexander, can you maybe tell us a little bit from Dubai economy in terms of what are some of the initiatives, which other government departments are participating, and what can we expect in terms of timelines for seeing a broader adoption and greater collaboration on creating this?
I think one of the key things is a mindset change for the different integrated solutions. Where I come from in Singapore, we use the word whole of government approach. So when an entrepreneur or a businessman goes to register his business license, it's almost a one-stop shop. He or she can register his license, get permits for running the restaurant, get the checks, inspections all done within one window. Of course, that is an ideal situation because it takes time to change mindsets. So one of the programs that DD is trying to establish, the soft part is we're going to establish a regulatory leadership roundtable because we want all the regulators, there are 32 regulators in Dubai, various industries to come and talk together. So for example, DD wants to talk to RTA, the municipality, the Dubai police, which controls many licenses, to see how we can create one window for the entrepreneur and the businessman and the investor. Even sometimes the PROs, they get confused with the different registrations. And we're talking about mainland Dubai. We're not even talking about the free zones. There are things like free zones. So free zones, which is another part of Dubai's economy, and the mainland economy needs to even integrate their services so that a company can set up in the mainland and the free zones with one identity and one trade license. I mean, of course, that's an ideal, but we can move towards that day. The second initiative we're trying to do is we have a digital payment scheme for paying your licenses. We have a company called M-Credit that helps in the digital payments process for paying your licenses. And third, as part of a smart city, we're trying to have a digital trade license on the blockchain again that is recorded and sealed, and we use that trade license for all the transactions to opening a bank account. So there are a few things that we are doing. And the last but not least, because many of the SMEs and the small and medium enterprises, they are still not going digital. They don't have a digital strategy. So we are trying to launch a digital strategy plan for the SME sector so that at least part of the transactions can be on a digital space to increase efficiency, as well as to make sure that they don't waste time trying to transact with their customers.
Can I just put you on the spot a little bit and ask, so do you have a sense of timeline when we might see some announcements?
I think from the Blockchain Council for Dubai's government services to go paperless, I think it's 2020, if I'm not mistaken. So by 2021, they need to go paperless and the services must be on the blockchain. So we hope that post 2021, there will be a very great impact on the level of services, and it will improve our ease of doing business. World Bank a report, which I think currently we're on the 20th, probably hopefully can go to top 10 by then.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So hopefully by 2020 we'll all expect to get rid of our wallets and our physical files and we'll be paperless. Mike, just to go back and maybe if you can share a little bit more about your experience in the US. I know there's probably where a lot of the incubation of a lot of these projects has started in terms of blockchain development in different areas. Can you tell us, have you seen any of this? I mean, you gave us an example with I guess it's solar credits, I guess is what you were saying. Have you seen it implemented in government services, or is there anything else you can share in terms of how does this actually support the development of smart cities specifically?
Sure. I should say this, that blockchain to me is probably one of the more disruptive technologies that exists for smart cities. And to try and wrap our heads around it right now, it would be trying to predict what the internet has become today, 25 years ago. I think blockchain will continue to develop over the next decade and more. And solutions that we can't even imagine today will become commonplace in that time. The interesting thing I think about blockchain is that it does create more peer-to-peer opportunities. And so when you talk about SMEs, and earlier I was talking about the key role of innovation within a smart city ecosystem, it's the SMEs, the startups, that are really going to drive this. They're going to imagine these solutions that cities and industries can implement. One example, coming back to a power-related example, but car charging stations. Smart contracts can be created that would allow your car to be charged at times when A, your car needs to be charged, but B, when the price to charge it hits a certain level. So you can more regulate your own consumption of energy and the cost of that consumption. I think it will be disruptive to industry as well. I don't want to leave out that part. I mean, we've seen is Mr. Free still here from Uber? We've seen what Uber has done in the transportation sector. And in fact, so Uber is, I think, the world's largest taxi kind of operation, and yet it doesn't own any vehicles. Airbnb, the largest room provider, owns no hotels. Facebook, the largest media company and it doesn't produce any content. I think blockchain is going to be something that will eventually kind of be disruptive in that same league. So where I have seen it, as I said before, is already in place is Brooklyn in microgrid application. But it's also being explored for cross-department opportunities in several cities in the US, actually, and around the world.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I think maybe we can open it up for some questions. Let me just summarize a little bit, and if you have any comments, please let me know. So essentially, the blockchain is a secure, immutable database, basically. It's not something necessarily that you see or you visit like the internet, but it's something that is underpinning, and hopefully you'll be interacting with it a lot more, making your lives easier in the future, even if you don't notice that it's there. It's going to help us, and it's going to be part of smart cities in helping us go paperless, in helping coordination across different government departments. And it's probably going to start through startups and small companies as a new technology, maybe companies that are only being born today, but in the future we can expect them to grow very fast. And so I think for me personally, you know, I represent one of those free zones that is very eager to learn and to essentially in the future engage with Dubai economy to understand how we can actually collaborate and you know, support some of these collaboration initiatives. At this point, I would like to ask if there's any questions or comments, or if there's anything else that you would like to add.
Thank you guys for your time and for this panel. My name is Aaron Peterman. I work for Boeing. Just a kind of a clarifying question about blockchain-based technologies and how it relates to Bitcoin. Can you guys talk about how they're related or different as I guess within the scope of the projects you've been talking about?
Anybody wants to?
Yeah. So Bitcoin is one of the use cases of blockchain, frankly. That's, again, to simplify as much as possible. It's just using blockchain technology to create cryptocurrency. It's one of the use cases. You can use blockchain infrastructure to do, you know, lease renewal. You can use blockchain infrastructure to do other types of services. And cryptocurrency is one of those use cases that uses blockchain technology to make sure that any cryptocurrency transaction is secure, is impermeable, is well distributed, and so on and so forth. So if I understood your question right, that's essentially the small difference. Did that answer your question?
Can I just add something? We talked a little bit earlier about the role of media to convey the positive impacts of smart cities. I think the role of media is going to have a real important shaping of blockchain, especially as it comes to Bitcoin. I mean, we've all seen how it has had its incredible growth in terms of valuation in recent months. To me, that's an unsustainable growth. And my only fear is that Bitcoin is so tied, at least in many minds, to blockchain that if that valuation should drop significantly, people will be resistant to blockchain in totality. And the important thing to know is that it's just one use case. And so the two are very separate. And so blockchain, I see as a technology or a solution that will continue long after whatever happens to Bitcoin and its valuation. But I think it's important for everybody here to know that they are separate. And my only fear is that the media so closely ties them together that blockchain could suffer as a result of Bitcoin's valuation.
They are separate. I'll just say one more thing about that. But it does show the power, I guess, and the polarizing views that have been created as a result of Bitcoin. You know, I'll borrow one of your earlier comments, Mike. I keep actually in my desk an article from Newsweek magazine from 1995. It basically talks how the internet is not really going to pan out, you know, and I guess at that point talks about, you know, sharing of information and so on, and how, you know, the internet is just going to be a passing fad. And I think in a similar way, you know, where we stand today, it's very difficult to comprehend you know, what Bitcoin or the sort of cryptocurrencies and what the blockchain technology itself will eventually grow into. For the same reason, I think it's great, and one of the reasons I was very excited to be here is to essentially have those conversations, to understand more about that, and to eventually have an open mind about where some of these things are going to go. Change is always difficult to at first understand and understand the direction of that. But this sector is going to continue to grow, and so it's probably worth keeping a close eye. I mean, you see very global leaders, I guess, talking about blockchain, talking about Bitcoin, and like I said, it's been very polarizing in both directions. So certainly an area to keep an eye on and to hopefully understand more going forward. Yes, please.
Hi, yeah. My name is Nikita Zaychikov, InfoWatch. So I had a question about security. As far as I understand, blockchain is inherently secure from outside intrusion, correct? But what if a person has authorized access to the data? Are there any inherent mechanisms for this protection? Thank you.
Guys, you want to help us?
Well, so that's a very technical question. I don't know if it's going to be relevant to the entire audience, but I don't, we say blockchain makes hacking difficult. It's not really true. It makes it very difficult for hackers to actually erase or get access to the data, but it still gets them, if they want to do something and get to where your infrastructure is, they probably can do. It's not the answer to your cybersecurity solution. It's not, okay, I'm on blockchain, I'm safe. That's not the answer. It makes it more difficult. It makes it more difficult to get to the data, and more importantly, to actually erase your data, which is something that companies may suffer from. If a hacker reaches into your infrastructure and takes a hold of your data, and they can hold you ransom or do lots of damages to your business in the case of blockchain, because it's distributed, because it's impermeable, so it makes that process a little more difficult. But hacking is always a challenge, and it'll remain to be a challenge. That is not the solution for cybersecurity. That's just one of the elements. Yeah. I have a follow-on question, or are you just saying yes? You're just saying yes? Because you're a cybersecurity vendor, aren't you?
I'm going to take that as a yes, gentlemen. And Franco, I believe our final question.
Thank you.
Hi, how are you? My name is Sam Hassan from Dubai Health Authority. So my question is that I believe that blockchain is a technology that ensures immutability of data and increased distributed trust mechanism. So these are the main forces that are driving blockchain technology. My question is that there are some existing technologies that have been implemented and working for so many years. So what will be the convincing ROI for us to change all these new technologies and use blockchain, which will incur a lot of change management issues, adding new workflows, training, blah, blah, blah. So what will be the convincing ROI to move from all technologies to blockchain?
I think maybe, Alexander, can I ask you to talk a little bit about how Dubai economy is going to help all of us?
I come from Singapore, and we have a different, we take a long-term view for the investments of projects, 10, 20 years. So in the case of Dubai economy, what we look for is a fast transactions. The customer is happier because time is money. The other area we want to invest in our services is to make sure that the entrepreneur, the SMEs, when they set up their business, the faster that they set up, the faster they get operate, the faster they can get the cash flow. That success is our success. All right, so we want to improve our ease of rankings. So the investment we put in for a blockchain-enabled government services, more integration, less touch points, those would be what I call the indirect ROI benefits for the economy. I think there was some prediction that with the blockchain of government services, our GDP could increase by 3 to 4%. So don't quote me, but there's some calculation going on that the blockchain investment by Dubai smart city establishment would lead to an increase in the GDP in terms of the ease of doing business, the ease of investments coming in, the ease of cash flow being eased, because cash flow is one of the key problems why a lot of companies in Dubai are facing challenges. So we hope that that would lead to an indirect benefit in the economy. That is an indirect answer to your question of our ROI, but really from a government perspective, this is what we look for.
Can I comment, yes. Franco? I just want to, because we've actually tried and burned our hands in quite a few government departments, and we looked at you have a very simple question and a very important question. I'm sure many people have the same question on their minds. What do I do? I'm an entity, I'm a government department, I'm a business, but in this case we're talking more smart cities, more government. Do I just change everything to blockchain? The answer, frankly, from our point of view is no, you don't. Blockchain is a good solution when you talk about a multi-department discussion or a multi-department service. For a single department service, it's not really. The added complexity and the added difficulty to implement is not worth there's no ROI, frankly, if it's a single department. If you're trying to change something internally as a service and you want to just implement blockchain for that, ROI-wise, from all angles, doesn't make any sense. If you're talking about implementing a service, and this is increasingly the case these days, that would require integration with different government departments. So you need to integrate with Emirates ID because you want to authenticate the users. You need to integrate with the healthcare authority because you want to make sure they did their healthcare test or something. You want to integrate with, this is when more participants on the chain, there's more value and the ROI becomes much more interesting for you and it allows you to deliver better service than if you were to do it on your own. So my answer would be, if it's a service related to your own environment, don't do it. Just be simple, databases, whatever it is that you have now. Hopefully you have the latest in terms of data and big data. But if you're talking about multi-party, multi-departments, external, not internal, multi-department type discussion, then it becomes a lot more interesting from an ROI perspective.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have time for one last question? Anybody? No? Well, within the MCC, we're taking a similar approach, and I think something that you reflected, we want to allow the private sector to develop. We want to see startups experimenting with the technology. There's no single solution, I guess, at this point. And obviously, we want to very much learn from Dubai economy and from what the government is doing, and from what's happening in the rest of the world as well. I think some of the examples that you mentioned, Mike, are very interesting. Well, I'd like to thank everybody, I guess, for your time. I think it's been very instructive, and if there's no more questions, I think we'll bring it to a close. So thank you.